set to present to you our CEO's dialogue, climate transition action plans, decarbonizing the business, innovation, growth, and sustainability. Joining us is a power-packed panelist from across the globe. But first, let me introduce to you our moderator. A very warm welcome to Mr. Chaitanya Kalia, Partner, National Leader, Climate Change and Sustainability Services, EY India. A very warm welcome to our panelists. Joining us from Cambridge, England is Ms. Claire O'Neill, Managing Director, Climate and Energy, World Business Council for Sustainable Development. A very warm welcome to Mr. Rajiv Chhabra, President and Managing Director, MG Motor India. May I also present to you Mr. Karan Singh, Managing Director, ACG. A very good evening and warm welcome to Mr. Subramanian Sarma, Chief Executive Officer and Managing Director of L&T Hydrocarbon Engineering, Whole-Time Director and Senior Executive Vice President Energy at L&T. I welcome all of you and let me now hand over to Mr. Kalia, our moderator.
Thank you very much, Isha. It's really my pleasure to be among such an august panel. And I welcome all of you once again to this, net zero decarbonization, transition, net zero transition. And sorry, getting some. All right. Yeah. So what I will do, I will ask one question to each one of you, and I'll start with Claire. And thereafter probably we have 30 minutes time. So whenever you need to pitch in for any response you think you'll be able to contribute, please feel free to just jump in, and we want to cover the topic as much as possible. So if that is good, I'll start, Claire, with you. My first question to you: recently concluded COP26. I can imagine we have been really eagerly looking at it and probably did some sort of a, I gave a presentation that it was a good COP or bad COP. But given that so much discussion around climate change happened, and what I really liked was, mix of government as well as the private sector participation. So looking at all of these things, what's your view? India has taken net zero target and many companies are within that, looking at net zero target. And, I was listening to our previous panelist, Nitin was talking about it. So when you look at from, WBCSD and you're promoting net zero and, scope 1, 2, 3 emission calculations, I don't know, many years. What is your outside in view for Indian companies and, recently taken target by Government of India?
Thank you. Great to join you. Well, I think it was a mixed COP. It had certainly achieved one of the objectives, which was to keep multilateralism on the road. And there were lots of questions going into this COP as to whether, in the teeth of a pandemic, with multiple questions about vaccine diplomacy, if this COP could actually still deliver. And it did. It kept everyone there. We had great representation of world leaders. We had a big focus on coal phase out. And we had some pretty extraordinary commitments made by Mr. Modi on behalf of the Indian government that really shift the temperature outcomes from the world if they can be delivered. And this increased focus, of course, on climate adaptation, which we know will continue to be a real challenge for governments and companies. But on the other hand, some of the questions it didn't answer, it didn't really focus on the involvement of the business community. If you read the final COP text, it does not mention business once in that 3,500 words. It seems to almost exclude the level of ambition and organization that is so very palpable now, both in my organization, which is a global CEO-led group of the world's most sustainable companies, including many Indian members, but also, as I've heard repeatedly, in dialogue with Indian business leaders over the last few weeks. And it's almost as if we've got a twin track where the COP is setting some general direction and making it very clear that net zero is this new organizing principle, but it's not delivering within its remit the how, the action, the sorts of conversations we were having in the previous session about, you know, the really technology focused solutions. So I think for businesses, there's a couple of sort of key points to take away. I mean, one is that net zero is that, you know, this is the new thing in the boardroom, if you like. We've got profit maximization and we've got net zero. There's also two other things that we don't talk about at COP, and for the WBCSD, we call them, it's a set of what we call our imperatives. Yes, we have a climate emergency, but we also have a massive global loss of biodiversity. There is a nature crisis, and we have growing inequality in almost all economic systems. So these twin or triple imperatives also are being addressed by the most ambitious and sustainable companies. And what we're finding is that in order to achieve net zero and make progress on the other imperatives, we have to collaborate. We have to collaborate with supply chains. We know we have to do that, as you said, if we're tracking Scope 3 emissions, but we also have to collaborate to come up with cost-effective solutions, particularly for the end user. And we also have to collaborate in a different way with our politicians. Yes, national government will set policies, but it's often the local politicians who have enormous power to create solutions, whether it's in the built environment or in the transportation sector. And again, that's a group who are not included officially in the COP process. So I think, you know, we have the COP setting the scene, but what we're then finding in the business community and stakeholders is this real sense of how are we actually going to deliver this extraordinary transition.
Absolutely right. And I didn't realize that there is not a single mention of you know, the corporate text in the entire thing, because there was so much of presence. Almost everyone was flying there,
exactly,
probably emitting more CO2, but that's a different story. So thanks, Claire. And you know, I'll come to you, you know, Rajiv, and you know, probably I'll ask a question a little bit, you know, also help me to decide something. So we all are talking about this transition and transition to EV, and I'm still contemplating. I'll be very honest with you, because sometimes I think that, okay, India is still, you know, 60-70% is coal based. And again, in the COP, we talked quite a lot about it. And then we have taken very, very ambitious target to increase from 100 gigawatt to, you know, total 500 gigawatt in next 9 to 10 years. So that transition to renewable is happening. So what's your view? How do you think that transition should happen, you know, from electric vehicle, or is it a strong hybrid or a combination of that? And you know, just speed up the transition. Already those who are in the LDV know they are suffering any which ways. So it's really imperative. It is really now, you know, it has to be done now. So over to you, Rajiv. What's your view?
No, thanks, Chaitanya. So I have a slightly different take and view on this whole thing. This whole topic is so important and complicated at the same point of time.
Absolutely.
So just imagine if you are the head of a country like India, you know, and you need to talk about decarbonization of the whole economy. You can divide the whole topic into 8 or 9 verticals, and every vertical, and at the same point of time, you need to make sure that you have growth, you have jobs and things like that, you know. So if you look at the actions, if you look at what has happened in the last few years, we have definitely seen acceleration of, and a very, very efficient use of energy as a focus. We have looked at wind and solar farms. We have looked at solar alliances. We have looked at right now EV policy. We have looked at even like LED lamps, which is efficient energy efficiency side, and also green hydrogen. We have been talking a lot, you know. So lots of actions have taken, but yes, lots more need to be taken. And this is a journey of next 30, 40, 50 years. So, you know, everything you can't achieve in one go, in my opinion, because you need to also align all the stakeholders. You need to educate people, and you need to take them together. There's a question of lots of jobs transition, skilling, reskilling people. Lots of people will lose their jobs, and then they need to be reskilled to get new jobs. And a developing country like us, the whole lot of complications, and being a vibrant democracy, you have election issues also, you know. So all these things, frankly, are very, very complicated. But I must say that what I can see as a corporate guy right now is that from mere tokenism, now awareness is increasing a lot. There's accelerated awareness. And let me talk about our sector now, EV, your question. You know, within EV, let's say in the last 2 years, the kind of changes in the speed we have seen is unbelievable. You know, though we can always argue that it was very late. But having said that, in the last 2 years, like as an example, when we thought of launching our cars, ZS EV, at that point of time, whole India was selling only 2,000 cars a year. Within 2 years now, we are selling almost 8,000 cars a year, and next year probably it will be 25,000. So again, in terms of percentage of the car industry is nothing, but the transformation is huge. And as probably you know that we have been saying, the tipping point would be when the pricing point comes down in Indian currency about 10 to 15 lakhs, which is going to happen in the next 2-3 years time. And lots of players, including us, are announcing EV. Now in EV, to your point, there is a well-to-wheel kind of a concept, and then you may say that energy produced, the battery takes a lot of energy, and in India the energy is produced through coal and fossil fuels, so it's really not green. Lots of studies have been done already, saying that if you are using your EV, even if suppose it is produced 80% from the coal plants, is still in 5 years time to 5.5 years time, depending on what segment of car you're buying, actually it makes sense. It's greener and cost of ownership is cheaper. So now just imagine in the next 5-6 years, when your energy mix is going to get changed, and India has said that in the next 15-20 years, probably 70-80% is going to be wind, the renewable energy. At that point of time, the cost of ownership and everything is going to be even much better. So I think the trend is clear, the direction is clear, the policy side government is making it very clear. It makes a lot of sense to go towards more electrification. And I think the government has made it very, very clear now that this is the way to go. And government of India is probably one of those rare governments where they have not even talked about hybrid. So there's nothing in between. So government, as you know, is not giving incentive for hybrid. They're saying you have to go for pure EV. So I think that's pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do believe, and I'm really encouraged by what you say, that in 3 to 4 years time, that we'll see that cost parity. I think that would be really encouraging if that happens. So wonderful. Thank you, Rajiv. So I'll come to you, Karan, and changing gear a little bit. You lead a company with footprint to multiple countries, and when I talk to some of the clients, they feel some sort of a pressure, saying that okay, decarbonization, what you are doing, a lot of data is being asked, disclosure being asked. So as a company who is committed to do more and committed to become green, is it the right time? Is it easy way to go? Where you are now, what you are doing today, is a problem of the vision, problem of philosophy, or problem of capital allocation? What you are dealing with in this net zero part today?
Thanks, Chaitanya. Firstly, being a part of the pharmaceutical industry, I think a lot of people don't know, but we consume, we use a lot of chemicals in our process. We consume a huge amount of power and a lot of water. And a lot of this leads to a tremendous amount of sort of effluence coming out of our facilities. What we've seen happen in the whole world in the last 2 years with this big black swan event of COVID, we don't want a similar situation occurring as far as the climate or environment goes, as we go forward. And since we run sort of this global enterprise, I think we took it upon ourselves to say, we need to start looking at sustainability measures within the facility itself. And I think even Rajiv talked about it. Today, we've got tremendous amount of innovation going on in a number of different areas, whether it's electric vehicles, whether it's LED bulbs, whether it's so on and so forth, to help us reduce and optimize, energy consumption, to help us reduce waste coming out of our facilities. So we started taking a number of different measures. So the first was, of course, measuring, one's carbon footprint, and where does one actually reside in this process, and what does one need to really tackle in the entire supply chain and within one's operations to help reduce and optimize, its use of materials. And second is, we spent a lot of, and I sort of work on these 3 principles internally. I said our facilities are going to be, they're going to be continuous, they're going to be contained, and they're going to be clean, right? And I keep talking about these principles to our chaps and associates internally. So we started off by investing tremendously in sort of industry 4.0 technologies, where we digitized complete facilities, set up probably about 1,000 power meters across the facility to measure exactly at which points, how much power and energy were we consuming. And then using our data scientists internally started looking at different ways to sort of optimize use of power and energy within the facility. We did a similar sort of exercise for all the materials that we sort of consume in our process to try and help us reduce waste. And then, once we sort of optimize it to the best that we could, the next step was really to see, okay, how can we move to the next stage? How can we ensure that there's absolutely zero waste coming out of the facility? And that's where we sort of invested. We went with the sort of zero liquid discharge system. Then we looked at power and we said, how can we completely move to clean energy? And we invested and set up a huge solar park in Maharashtra itself to power most of the facilities. But solar in itself is probably not the most efficient way to run an industry. It is only 33% efficient from one perspective because you only get sun for a certain number of hours of the day. So we've started now looking at fuel cell and hydrogen technologies where we can, and I've been reading a lot about this, but today within a space of 10,000 square foot, you can build on site a 3.5 megawatt hydrogen cell, that will generate its own power and completely take you off the grid. Something that's really, really interesting in the way technology is evolving, and so we've started looking at all these different measures. And as Mr. Modi said, by 2070, India will be net zero. I think we're planning to do it probably over the next 5 years. So we're really sort of on track, and we truly believe in completely decarbonizing, and not only the operations. At the end, I think Claire talked about it, where she said, look, this requires collaboration, and it requires collaboration not only within our organization, but it requires collaboration with the entire supply chain, right? And we got to work with not only our suppliers, our partners, customers, to really look at the entire supply chain and where at different points, can we actually optimize and decarbonize completely. So sort of there are a number of different initiatives that we've been taking in this direction. I believe it is our responsibility now to act on some of these measures, because we definitely don't want to have another black swan event as far as climate goes, especially with what we've seen and the kind of disruptions we've experienced over the last 2 years.
Absolutely, Karan. Thank you so much for explaining it in such a nice way. Ultimately, it's not only about climate, it's about looking at overall aspect, which even Claire touched, that we have to look at in totality and looking all the 3 or 4 aspect of which is making impact and making sustainable planet, or leave the planet for the future generation. So thank you so much for that. So coming back to you, Subramaniam. So you are leading L&T, is known for their acumen and knowledge and technology. And Nitin was like saying, and I'll pick up his point, saying that okay, India is self-sufficient to do a lot of R&D. So what's your view? From hydrocarbon, what would be the next? Are we self-sufficient to move to the hydrogen? Will that be the fuel of choice, or will it be carbon capture and storage, or some sort of a biofuel? Is how long will be a hydrocarbon economy, or we are going to transition to new energy, as we call it? What's your view on that?
Thank you, Chaitanya, and thank you all the other speakers. Good to meet you all. Meet you. Well, I think this is a question which is not. There is no straight answer to that, because at the end of the day, we are, as India, we are not a very rich economy. We are moving towards a rich economy. So I think the affordability is also of paramount importance. I think we are looking at the clean energy. It has to be affordable, and it also has to be sustainable. So there are various parameters which has to be considered when you're trying to develop an energy mix. I think the 2070 target by the Honorable Prime Minister for the net zero carbon has been sort of set based on keeping this in mind in terms of our dependency. Also the energy security. I think we'll have to also, there's a geopolitical angle to that. We'll have to keep the energy security aspect in mind. So there's energy security, affordability, sustainability, and of course it has to be clean. So I think the 40, 50 years what we have ahead of us, in my view, I think we are allowed to sort of develop and explore, keep all the options open. It is going to be a mixture. All of them will coexist in some form or the other. and to say that thermal and the coal is going to completely extinguish, I don't sort of believe that, because we still have a very large reserves of coal, and there are technologies which are developing, already existing, and there are developing which will definitely bring down the carbon footprint. So everything we do, we need to be very environmentally conscious and try to reduce the carbon footprint. But to say that this will not exist, I think it is a little bit premature. Similarly, fossil fuels, I mean, I think the demand for our energy as the economy grows, and if you're going to become a 5 trillion economy, and the population growth, demand is going to be quite humongous, and it cannot be met by one source of energy. So I think the fossil fuel, maybe it will be more gas based, less crude oil based. We will have less of refined products like diesel, petroleum, that will get sort of replaced by electric vehicles, what Rajiv spoke about, and maybe we will also have some hydrogen powered vehicles, and then therefore, so I think the mix will change, and as I see it, you will have, at least for the next 2 decades, all forms of energy coexisting, which is thermal, which is fossil, conventional fossil, coal-based fossil, and then also new energy, which is solar, wind, and I think hydrogen will also start contributing to it maybe 5 years down the line. So, and I think that's a good for a country like India, as I said, because we need to keep the balance very much in mind as we start pushing each form of energy.
Thank you very much. I think I tend to agree with you that, we are still very, very much coal and fossil fuel, liquid and gases dependent economy, and making that shift would take some time. It's not going to happen really fast. How fast we can do probably will depend on several other factors, and we talked about it in terms of technology, in terms of collaboration, etc. I think very, very good analysis, Mr. Subramanian. Thank you.
I think, Chaitanya, just to add, I mean, I think very recently I also had the privilege to talk to some of the very important people from the Ministry of Oil in neighboring countries like in Middle East and Saudi Arabia and UAE and all, who are the large oil producers. Mm-hmm. I mean, and their viewpoint is pretty similar. I mean, I think while they are also pushing ahead with alternative sources of energy, they still believe that the fossil fuel will have a big role to play for years to come. So I think the world has to get used to the coexistence of all these sources of energy, while focusing a lot on reducing carbon footprint and as a principle, improving the overall efficiency, which I think can be really achieved by what Karan said through use of technology. I mean, I think the focus should be in reducing consumption and then and improving the efficiency and getting more out of one unit of energy. And then the second phase would be sort of shifting the sources.
Absolutely. So I agree with you that we need time, but at the same time, we know there is a counter view that we don't have time. Already it's the global temperature is on rise. Even the commitment given by all the countries, they get fulfilled. Probably we are not yet there, in the sense we are still above 1.5 degree. So I'll come back to Claire. When you talk to other CEOs around the world, what is their view? I mean, how they take next step? Is it again, the cost versus profitability versus what to do right? And would they prefer to wait till something comes up which is more economical?
It's a great question. I mean, I think that the whole 1.5 degree landing zone, I'm a former politician in the UK, and we have a thing called the Overton principle, which is, you aim for the impossible and you hope that you get somewhere reasonable. And I think there is a growing sense that, as has been so very eloquently just explained by Mr. Sarma, that for the big developing countries, this energy trilemma is absolutely real. And sometimes when you sit and discuss, the vision of a 100% renewable energy system, which is a nice idea. I'm a former energy minister. It can't exist. We will have to have some form of thermal generation and a lot more battery storage than we have in the future. And of course, we have huge energy needs in the near term. So so I'm not sure whether it's 1.5 or 2.5 degrees, but what I'm sensing though is actually that we're not going to wait for perfect. We're going to get on with it, because there is, I think, a really strong sense in the business community not only are these actions the right thing to do, they're also a huge business opportunity. We're talking about a change in our economic system on the scale of the steam-powered industrial revolution happening at the speed of the tech revolution, with globally aligned policies and trillions of dollars that would like to invest alongside governments. And this is an amazing opportunity. And so my sense is that business is not just because it's the right thing to do. And there is a really strong sense of moral purpose, if I can call it that, in the boardroom. You really feel it now. And as I mentioned, it's not just climate, it's also the sense of solving for nature and inequality. But there are these extraordinary opportunities to be invested in. And we don't talk enough about decarbonisation of fossil fuel through carbon capture and storage. That's another area where we don't like to go often as a global community, but we know from the WBCSD members that carbon capture, carbon removal is a very big part of their net zero plans. And I'll give you another little test. Guess how many times opportunity appeared in the final Glasgow text? 0. So again, this is not acknowledging that the smart thinkers, the opportunity seizers, and the investors are really wanting to line up behind this transition, because it's the right thing to do, because the markets are there, and because we can clearly see that for many assets they will end up being stranded, and we do need to move away from them.
Yeah, thank you so much, Claire. So I think I'll pick up from there and ask this question either to Karan and Rajiv. Maybe any one of you can ask, what's happening in your boardroom? What kind of thinking, strategic discussion around this topic is happening? Are you getting support from your board or the management, in the sense that, yes, this is what we need to do, and we have to probably take some of the bold decision and it will get supported? So what is that, the conversation in the boardroom and strategic thinking that is happening?
So, I'll pick that up.
Sure.
Claire sort of said it right at the beginning when she was talking. She said, today it's about profit maximization, which is one of the discussions we have in the boardroom. The other one is net zero. So it's almost become a mandatory topic of discussion and an agenda that we sit down and we talk about, quite frequently. In terms of just what are the measures that we're taking, not only within our existing operations, but also in the products that we produce, and how we're sort of making them more sustainable over the longer period. So definitely, this is, in my opinion, it's a must-have. I don't think it's a question of whether we'd like to have any more. And there's serious consideration and plans being built around it. Even products that we're developing for the future have a clear focus and a clear angle of sustainability around them. And we believe that that's what consumers in the future is going to demand. That's what we believe governments are going to get aligned, or have gotten aligned to. And we believe that our customers are going to be, completely sort of looking at those organizations that are sort of, taking measures and steps in this direction as well, that they'd like to partner with going into the future. So most definitely.
Great.
So if I can just add on to that, so ESG has become one of the prominent topics in all our board meetings, and not only in board meetings, but also internal, our manager level meeting. It's a big topic. And I want to just give you an example, like as far as MG is concerned, that we decided, and we are only 2.5 years old in this country, right? And our second product was EV. And lots of guys were really questioning our strategy of launching an EV 2 years back. Where, like I told you, the whole industry was 2,000 units a year. But not only that, we had our sustainability cross-functional team almost at the same time when our company got formed. So the sustainability team was formed along with the company, and then the carbon footprint we have been measuring from that date. As an example, some of you probably would have seen that we are the first manufacturer in the country where we have started sourcing energy from a wind solar hybrid energy farm from Gujarat, and that's equivalent to almost putting 1.3 million trees in the next 5 years. The kind of energy transition which we have done, that's the kind of a carbon equivalent saving. So lots of things that even we have some, like Karan was saying, there are some hazardous material or some waste, from your factories. In fact, from that waste, we are making some byproducts which go into the cement industry. So kind of a recycle. So, a whole lot of things we are doing it. And I would like to believe it's not only MG. Most of the companies now are getting into this space. So it has moved from tokenism to policy making to taking some actions. Yes, all of us need to do a lot more now. As Ken was saying, that there's no time now. But I think the first thing, which is the starting point, which I think every company may be doing or should do, that they need to start with what is the existing carbon footprint of their corporate group, and it may be towards the product, towards the plant, towards the people education side, and all the processes. And then you need to start reducing the footprint, improving the efficiencies. And in every area, I'm sure we can improve a lot. And that's what I think every company should be doing it at this point of time. And we are definitely doing it.
Great. So Isha is there on the screen. That's an indication that our time is up. Gentlemen, I have many more questions to ask, but probably we have very little time. My apologies. I would have loved to ask more questions and learn from you, but this is where it is. Thank you very much for your great contribution, your candid thoughts and discussion. Thank you so much. It was really a pleasure talking to you. Over to you, Isha.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Kalia. And you very rightly mentioned that with a panel on board like the ones that we have, our distinguished panelists, it's such a pleasure. Conversations can go on and on. So I'd like to once again thank Ms. Claire O'Neill for her time. Of course, Mr. Chaba, Mr. Singh, Mr. Sarma. It's a delight listening to all of you share your views there. Thank you once again for joining us. And of course, Mr. Kalia, for moderating this session so very well.
Thanks everyone. Thanks, Isha. Thank you. Bye-bye.
And there's a lot in store for all our delegates right here. But before I tell you who will be joining us for our next special address on embracing the change, achieving net zero infrastructure, I'd like to mention to all of you that we look forward to your participation in our survey, because that tells us more on what you and your organizations are thinking. So please do participate. Up next is going to be a special address. Do listen in to this very special architect joining us next.